If your surname is on this list, you are not just Spanish by heritage. You are connected to a specific vessel, a specific departure date, a specific manifest written by a clerk in Seville who could not have imagined that 400 years later, a stranger would be reading his handwriting, looking for a name. Every Spaniard who crossed to the New World left from one port, through one office, on one named ship, and that clerk wrote it down. 10 surnames, 10 bloodlines, 10 ships, and by the end of this video, you will know exactly which timber your ancestor stood on when he watched Spain disappear behind him. Stay until number 1, because that ship carried a secret cargo the crown spent generations pretending it never allowed aboard. Before we begin, understand what makes this possible. In 1503, the Spanish crown created the Casa de Contratación, the House of Trade, in Seville. From that moment, Seville was the only legal port of departure for the Americas. Every passenger needed a license. Every license was recorded. The books of passengers to the Indies run from 1509 onward, and they still exist, in the Archive of the Indies in Seville, in a building of stone squares beside the cathedral. Names, fathers' names, home villages, ships. Your ancestor is not a rumor. He is an entry in a ledger. Number 10. Vega. From the Spanish Vega, the fertile river plain, the flat land where crops grow. A farmer's word, a peaceful word. But the men who carried it did not stay in the meadow. The Vega name appears again and again in the passenger books of the early Caribbean crossings, on the workhorse ships that no history book bothers to name, the caravels that ran between Seville and Hispaniola in the first decades after Columbus. These were small vessels, 60 or 70 feet, crammed with men, barrels of hardtack, and salt beef that turned green before landfall. The Atlantic crossing took 5 to 9 weeks. If your name is Vega, your bloodline came from farmland and boarded a ship the size of a modern house to cross an ocean nobody had mapped, on the earliest, roughest, deadliest run of them all. The next surname belonged to the fleet that carried the most famous conquest in history. 11 ships, 600 men, and when they landed, their commander did something to those ships that no captain had ever done. Number 9. Sandoval. From the Latin, a name tied to a place, Saltus Novalis, the newly cleared woodland. Gonzalo de Sandoval was barely 22 years old and already one of Cortez's most trusted captains. In February 1519, Cortez sailed from Cuba with 11 ships and roughly 600 men, bound for the Yucatan. They founded Veracruz, and there, with his men wavering and Cuba's governor demanding his arrest, Cortez ordered the fleet run aground and destroyed. Not burned, as the legend says, scuttled, stripped, and beached. The message was identical either way. There was no ship home, there was only forward. If your name is Sandoval, your bloodline stood on a beach in Mexico and watched the only road back to Spain be deliberately destroyed. Number 8 is a name from the mountains of the north, and it belongs to the greatest ship story ever recorded. 5 vessels left, 1 came home, 18 men were aboard her. Number 8. Elcano, a Basque name, from the old tongue of the mountain coast, tied to a place, to a house, to the hard green country where Spain built her best ships. On the 20th of September 1519, 5 ships sailed from Sanlúcar de Barrameda with about 270 men, the Trinidad, the San Antonio, the Concepcion, the Santiago, and the smallest of them, an 85-ton carrack originally called the Santa Maria, bought by the Casa de Contratación and renamed the Victoria. Magellan commanded. Juan Sebastián Elcano, a Basque merchant captain, came aboard seeking a royal pardon for old crimes. The Santiago wrecked, the San Antonio deserted, the Concepcion was burned for lack of men, the Trinidad was captured by the Portuguese. Magellan died in the Philippines in April 1521. And on the 6th of September 1522, one ship came into Sanlúcar, the Victoria, with 18 starving men aboard, having sailed around the entire world. Elcano commanded her. If your name is Elcano, your bloodline stood on the deck of the only ship in history to be the first to circle the earth. Number 7 left from the same river, on a fleet of 600 men and 5 ships, and not one of those ships was ever seen again. Number 7. Dorantes, from an old place name in Castile, a name that appears in the record for one reason above all others. Andrés Dorantes de Carranza sailed on the 17th of June 1527 from Sanlúcar de Barrameda with Pánfilo de Narváez, 5 ships, 600 men, bound for Florida. A hurricane took 2 ships in the Caribbean before they ever reached the mainland. The rest of the fleet lost its own army on the Florida coast, sailed up and down for a year searching, and finally gave up and went home to Spain. The men left behind melted their stirrups and horseshoes into nails, made bellows out of deer hide, and built 5 rafts. The rafts were swallowed by the Gulf. 4 men out of 600 lived: Cabeza de Vaca, Alonso del Castillo Maldonado, Andrés Dorantes, and Estevanico, an enslaved North African, the first man of Africa to cross the American continent. If your name is Dorantes, your bloodline boarded 5 ships and survived as one of 4. Before we continue, if you are finding this useful, subscribe to Origins Decoded. Every week we uncover the history hidden inside surnames, bloodlines, and family names from across the world. Hit subscribe so you never miss one. The next surname belongs not to a soldier, but to the men who made the crossing possible at all. Without them, every ship in this video sinks. Number 6. Gallego. From Gallego, the Galician, a man from Galicia, the green rainy corner of the far northwest where Spain meets the Atlantic. It is not a family name in the noble sense. It is a description. It says, this man came from the coast where the sea is a job, not an adventure. Galicians and Basques crewed the Spanish fleets out of all proportion to their numbers, because they were the ones who actually knew how to sail. Vasco Gallego was Magellan's pilot on the Victoria. Pilots were the most valuable men aboard, trained and examined by the Casa de Contratación itself, keepers of the charts, the ones who kept a ship off the rocks in water no European had ever sounded. If your name is Gallego, your bloodline did not command the ships. Your bloodline sailed them, and every captain in this story owed his life to a man like your ancestor. Number 5 is the name of the treasure fleet itself. Twice a year, for 200 years, the wealth of an empire crossed the Atlantic in convoy, and everything depended on the men who guarded it. Number 5. Flores. From flor, the flower, or from Flores, an old Visigothic given name. It sounds delicate. It belonged to some of the hardest sailors Spain produced. By the 1560s, the Spanish had learned a bitter lesson. A lone treasure ship was a gift to pirates. So they built the flota, the treasure fleet system, great armed convoys, sailing on a schedule between Seville and the Americas, silver from Potosi and Mexico moving in guarded columns. Álvaro Flores de Quiñones, and men like him commanded these armadas. It was one of the most sophisticated logistical operations in the early modern world, and hurricanes destroyed it again and again anyway. Entire fleets lie on the seafloor off Florida to this day. If your name is Flores, your bloodline guarded the silver that made Spain the richest power on earth, and rowed the ships that most often never arrived. Number 4 sounds like a saint's blessing. The family carried the crown's own authority across the ocean, and their ships did not carry gold, they carried law. Number 4. Salazar. From the Basque Sala and Zahar, the old hall, the ancestral house. The Salazar were an old and stubborn northern family, and their name runs through the colonial administration like a thread. Once the conquest ended, the empire needed something the conquistadors could never provide: government. And so the fleets began carrying a different cargo: judges, treasury officials, notaries, royal inspectors sent to investigate the conquerors themselves, men who arrived with paper instead of steel, and who broke more conquistadors than any indigenous army ever managed. If your name is Salazar, your bloodline sailed not to conquer the New World, but to bring the conquerors to heel, and history has never once thanked you for it. Number 3 carries a name that means of the field. The people who bore it made the crossing that almost nobody talks about, and it changed the Americas more than any battle. Number 3. Delgado, or the families of the pobladores. From Delgado, the thin one, a nickname that hardened into a surname. Because here is what the conquistador legend hides. Most Spaniards who crossed the Atlantic were not soldiers. They were settlers. Farmers, blacksmiths, weavers, notaries, wives, and children. From 1530, the crown required a royal license for anyone traveling to the Indies, and the Casa de Contratación processed them by the thousand. Whole families walked to Seville from villages in Extremadura and Andalusia, sold everything, waited weeks on the Guadalquivir, and boarded a ship for a place they had only heard described. Most never returned. Most were never famous. They are the reason Spanish is spoken from California to Patagonia. If your name is Delgado, your bloodline was not on that ship for gold. It was on that ship because there was no life left behind it. Number 2 is one of the oldest names in the Basque Country, and it belonged to the men who built the ships. Every hull in this video came from somewhere. Somebody laid the keel. Number 2. Aramburu, and the shipwright families of the north. A Basque name, from Aran and Buru, the head of the valley. The great ships of the Spanish Empire were not built in Seville. They were built on the Bay of Biscay, in Ondaroa, in Portugalete, in Zarautz, in the yards of Biscay and Guipúzcoa, where oak forests came down almost to the water. The Victoria herself was built in a Basque yard and purchased by the Casa de Contratación for 800 gold ducats. These were families who worked timber for generations, whose sons became the pilots and masters, who sailed what their fathers had made. The crown depended on them absolutely. If your name is Aramburu, your bloodline did not merely sail Spain's empire. Your bloodline built it, plank by plank, from the oaks of a valley most Spaniards had never seen. And now, number 1. This name did not appear on the manifest, or it appeared as something else, a name borrowed, a name bought, a name invented in a clerk's office in Seville. Because from 1530 the law was explicit: no Jews, no Moors, no conversos, no one whose blood the Inquisition considered suspect could sail to the Indies. And yet they sailed. Here is what they were protecting. Number 1. Rivera, and the names carried by the conversos who crossed anyway. From Ribera, the riverbank, the shore, the edge of the water. A name of thresholds and crossings, which is exactly what it turned out to be. The Casa de Contratación required proof of clean lineage, limpieza de sangre, before granting a license. Witnesses were interviewed, petitions were filed, and the system leaked, constantly, because clerks could be paid, witnesses could be persuaded, and a family with a converso grandmother could become a family from a different village with a different name in the space of one afternoon and one bribe. They crossed. They founded towns in Mexico and New Granada and Peru. They lit candles on Friday nights in rooms with the shutters closed and taught their children never to explain why. The Inquisition followed them across the ocean and hunted them for 2 centuries, and still they survived, hidden inside names like this one, on manifests that lied. If your name is Rivera, your bloodline may have boarded a ship under a name that was not its own, crossed an ocean to escape a fire, and kept a secret so well that 400 years later, the ledger in Seville still does not know who your ancestor really was. 10 surnames, 10 bloodlines, 10 ships, 10 crossings, from the tiny caravels of the first Caribbean runs to the treasure convoys, from the Victoria limping home around the world with 18 skeletons aboard to the family boats carrying farmers who never made a single line of history. Your name is not just a name. It is a manifest. It is a departure date. It is a man standing at a rail on the Guadalquivir, watching Spain slide away, not knowing if he would ever see it again, and mostly, he did not. Drop your surname in the comments, and tell me which crossing you think your bloodline made. And if your family kept the story of the ship, say it, because those stories deserve to be heard. If you made it to the end of this video, subscribe to Origins Decoded. Every week we go deeper into the history hidden inside the names people carry, without knowing what they mean. The next video is already waiting for you.